Chapter 1. The Newcomer. The town of Willowbrook was quiet, its streets wrapped in a veil of mist as evening settled in. Nestled between dense woods and rolling hills, the town had a peculiar charm and an unsettling air of secrecy. Sophia, a young journalist, had recently moved here, seeking solitude and a break from her fast-paced city life after a heartbreak. She'd heard about Willowbrook's calm and the way it seemed to exist apart from the rest of the world. It was exactly what she needed. She had rented a small, ivy-covered cottage on the town's edge, a place with old-world character and a history she found oddly comforting. On her first night, as she unpacked her belongings, she noticed an old, dusty journal hidden deep in the bedside drawer. Curious, she brushed off the dust and opened it, revealing faded handwriting on yellowed pages. The name, Emma, was scrawled on the inside cover, along with the year 1923. Emma had once lived in this cottage, and her words seemed filled with an unspoken fear. Sophia was immediately drawn into the journal's pages, her heart beating a little faster as she read. Emma described a sense of unease, a fear that she was being watched. Some nights, she wrote, strange noises filled the air, whispers, barely perceptible, yet somehow menacing. There were mentions of shadowy figures she saw from her window, lingering in the fog, staring back at her. Beware the whispers at midnight, **** she had written several times throughout the entries, as though she needed to remind herself of this warning. Sophia closed the journal, feeling a shiver run down her spine. She glanced around the quiet cottage, now feeling a touch of the anxiety Emma had described. The fireplace crackled, and shadows danced across the walls, giving the small space a ghostly ambiance. She brushed off her unease, convincing herself that it was simply the eerie charm of an old, isolated cottage in a mysterious town. Yet, she couldn't ignore the words, "Beware the whispers at midnight." The next day, Sophia walked through town, hoping to learn more about Willowbrook's history. The locals were polite but reserved, often averting their gaze when she asked about the town's past. Only one person seemed open to talk, an elderly man named Tom, who had lived in Willowbrook his entire life. He gave her a strange look when she mentioned the cottage and Emma's journal. "Stay indoors at night," Tom warned her gravely. "And don't pay any mind to strange sounds. The town's quiet for a reason. Things happened here a long time ago, things better left undisturbed." Tom's warning, while cryptic, unsettled her further. That night, she found herself lying awake, listening to every sound, her mind replaying Emma's words and Tom's warning. As the clock struck midnight, a strange sensation crept over her, a feeling as if she were being drawn towards the window, against her better judgment. She hesitated, then cautiously peeked outside. The street was bathed in mist, and a thick silence hung in the air. Then, a shadowy figure appeared through the fog. It moved slowly down the street, stopping right outside her cottage, as if sensing her gaze. She couldn't make out a face, but she felt a chilling sensation, like the figure's stare was fixed directly on her. Then she heard it. A faint, almost indistinct whisper, as though 100 voices were murmuring all at once. The sound filled her with dread, and she backed away from the window, her heart racing. As the figure faded into the mist, Sophia stood frozen in place, wondering if this was just the beginning of what Emma had warned her about. The whispers, it seemed, were real. Chapter 2. The Midnight Whispers. The following days in Willowbrook were unsettling for Sophia. She couldn't shake the memory of that shadowy figure and the faint, chilling whispers from her first night. Her mind replayed the experience repeatedly, and Emma's words echoed ominously, "Beware the whispers at midnight." Determined to understand the strange events, Sophia started spending more time around town, hoping to unearth clues about the town's hidden history. The people of Willowbrook, however, were not as welcoming as she'd hoped. They avoided eye contact and gave curt responses to her questions, often brushing her off with nervous glances. Their reluctance only fueled her curiosity, making her more certain that something sinister was being concealed. One day, while at the local market, Sophia spotted the elderly man, Tom, who had warned her on her first day. She approached him, hoping he might be more open this time. "Tom," she began carefully, "I can't stop thinking about the figure I saw. And those whispers, it's like they were calling to me. Please, do you know what's happening in Willowbrook?" Tom's eyes grew dark, and he looked around as if ensuring they were alone. In a hushed voice, he spoke, "Willowbrook isn't like other towns, dear. There's a reason the streets are deserted by night. Long ago, something terrible happened here, a tragedy no one likes to remember." Sophia leaned in, listening intently as Tom continued. He explained that nearly a century ago, a series of strange disappearances had plagued Willowbrook. People would vanish without a trace, leaving only whispers behind. The townsfolk had believed these voices were the spirits of those lost, trapped between worlds, calling out to the living, waiting to claim another. "Once you hear the whispers, they mark you," Tom warned her with a grim expression. "You might think it's all in your head, but it's not. The figure you saw, it's one of them, the lost souls. And once they find you, they don't let go." Sophia's skin prickled with fear. She tried to convince herself that Tom's words were just a local legend, a way to keep the town's history alive. But the weight of his warning lingered, and she couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that something beyond her understanding was at play. That night, Sophia resolved to stay awake until midnight once more. She kept the lights off and sat by the window, the room bathed in a dim, ghostly glow. As the clock struck 12, she heard it again, the faint, almost sorrowful whispers, drifting through the air like smoke. Her heart raced as she strained to catch the words, but they were muddled, as if spoken in a forgotten language. Slowly, she glimpsed movement in the mist outside. A familiar shadowy figure appeared, drifting slowly toward her cottage. The figure halted beneath the street lamp across from her window, standing completely still, watching. This time, Sophia felt compelled to listen more closely. She opened the window just a crack, and the whispers grew louder, filling her with a strange mix of fear and sorrow. It was as if the voices were pleading with her, trapped souls longing to tell their stories. The figure seemed to notice her open window, and for a terrifying moment, she thought it might come closer. But instead, it vanished into the fog, leaving only silence behind. Sophia closed the window quickly, her hands shaking. She knew now that she couldn't simply ignore the whispers or the shadowy figure. Willowbrook held secrets that demanded to be uncovered, and whether she liked it or not, she was already in too deep. Chapter 3. Secrets in the Shadows. Sophia's curiosity grew into an obsession. The whispers, the shadowy figure, and Tom's warnings weighed heavily on her mind. The idea that she had been marked by something supernatural both terrified and intrigued her. Determined to uncover the truth, she spent her days poring over every historical record she could find about Willowbrook and its dark past. One chilly afternoon, Sophia visited the town library, a dusty, forgotten building with shelves stacked with crumbling books and old records. She found an entire section dedicated to the town's history. As she combed through stacks of faded newspapers, one article caught her attention. It was a front-page piece from 1923, titled, "Tragedy Strikes Willowbrook, Residents Vanish Without a Trace." Her heart raced as she realized this was the very year Emma had lived in the cottage and written her journal. The article described a series of disappearances, all happening at midnight. The people of Willowbrook believed that those who went missing had encountered the whispered ones, spirits of those who had drowned in Willowbrook's lake under mysterious circumstances nearly a century ago. The tragedy was rumored to be a ritual gone wrong, and ever since, the spirits of those lost had been haunting the town, seeking revenge or release. Sophia shuddered as she read the final line of the article. "Once you hear the whispers, the whispered ones will follow." That evening, Sophia took her findings to Tom, hoping he could shed more light on the legend. The old man sighed deeply, as if the weight of the town's secrets had burdened him for too long. He revealed that the whispered ones were said to be trapped by an ancient curse, one that kept them bound to Willowbrook, lingering at the edges of the living world. Each generation, the spirits would call to someone new, dragging them deeper into their spectral world. "What happened to Emma?" Sophia asked, fearing the answer. Tom hesitated before replying. "Emma tried to set them free," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She thought that if she could understand their pain, their reason for staying, she could help them cross over. But instead, she became one of them." A cold shiver ran down Sophia's spine. The woman whose journal she had found, who had tried to break the curse, had herself fallen victim to it. But unlike Emma, Sophia couldn't bring herself to walk away. She felt a strange pull, a sense of responsibility to finish what Emma had started. "Tom, noticing the determination in her eyes, gave her a warning she would never forget. The whispered ones are trapped between life and death, their voices calling out in anguish. If you go too far, Sophia, you may never return. Ignoring his warning, Sophia decided to take the next step in her investigation. She ventured to the old, abandoned church on the edge of town, a place she had read about in her research. The church had once been the site of strange gatherings, rumored to involve rituals and sacrifices to appease the spirits of the lake. As she entered the church, a thick, musty smell filled her nose, and the light barely filtered through the stained glass windows, casting an eerie glow. Symbols were carved into the walls, faded but still faintly visible, symbols that seemed almost alive in the dim light. In the corner, she found an old, dusty wooden chest, bound with rusted chains. Her hands trembled as she pried it open, revealing a collection of letters and journals, carefully preserved but filled with chilling content. The letters revealed a pact made by a group of townsfolk, a secret society, as she suspected, to protect Willowbrook by keeping the spirits at bay through ritual sacrifices. They believed the lake was cursed, a gateway for lost souls, and only by offering sacrifices could they prevent the whispered ones from dragging others into the lake's dark depths. Realizing the extent of Willowbrook's secrets, Sophia returned to her cottage with the chest, her mind racing with both fear and determination. As midnight approached, she prepared herself, knowing she was now entangled in the fate of the whispered ones. She would have to face the spirits or risk becoming one of them. Chapter 4. The Midnight Confrontation. The air felt heavier that night, as though the entire town held its breath. Midnight was fast approaching, and Sophia sat by the window of her cottage, staring at the chest of old letters and journals she had found. Each page she had read spoke of dark rituals, whispers from beyond, and the desperation of Willowbrook's townspeople to contain a force they could barely understand. Sophia realized she was now deeply entangled in a dangerous mystery, one that demanded answers. Determined, she pulled Emma's journal from her bag, flipping through its pages until she reached the last entry. Tonight, I'll find them. If I understand their pain, perhaps I can help them find peace. Sophia's heart clenched as she read those words. Emma had tried to communicate with the spirits and had been consumed by them. Yet, something in Sophia's heart told her that she couldn't walk away now. With a deep breath, she gathered the chest and journal, placing them on the small table near the window. She was ready to confront the whispered ones. As the clock struck midnight, the air outside grew deathly still. Sophia felt a chill creep through her cottage, despite the fire she had lit. Suddenly, a low whisper floated through the room, growing louder and filling the space with haunting voices. It was as if the walls themselves were speaking, each whisper carrying a distinct tone, some sorrowful, others angry, and a few desperately pleading. Sophia could feel their eyes on her, invisible but heavy. Summoning her courage, she spoke aloud. I know you are there. I know you're trapped between worlds. I want to help you, if you'll let me. The whispers fell silent. The room was filled with a heavy, expectant quiet. She could sense that her words had stirred something, had awakened a part of them that yearned for release. Then, as if from the mist itself, the shadowy figure she had seen before appeared outside her window. But this time, it did not simply linger in the distance. It moved closer, its indistinct face coming into focus as it pressed against the glass, mere inches away from her. The figure's face was haunting, pale, with hollow eyes filled with anguish, but there was also a glimmer of recognition. Sophia's heart stopped. This was Emma. Sophia opened the window, her breath trembling. The icy night air filled the room, and with it came the ghostly presence of Emma, whose eyes now held a desperate intensity. Help us, ***, she whispered, her voice a thin thread of sorrow. Sophia held up the journal. Emma, I've read your words. I know you tried to help them, but they took you. Tell me how I can help you find peace. Emma's gaze softened, and she raised a translucent hand, pointing towards the chest of letters. Sophia understood instantly. The letters, the journals, the pact, they were the key to breaking the curse. The townspeople's secret ritual had bound the souls to this place. Only by undoing what had been done could they be freed. Suddenly, the whispers intensified, filling the room with a storm of voices. The shadows in the room grew darker, shifting and swirling, as though the other spirits were resisting. Sophia clutched the letters tightly, and with a sudden instinct, she reached for a candle. She knew what she had to do. One by one, she burned each letter, each symbol of the town's pact. As each page crumbled into ash, the whispers grew softer, as if a weight was being lifted. The shadows began to fade, and the air became lighter, almost peaceful. When she looked up, Emma's spirit was fading, her face calm and grateful. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice softer than a breeze. "The curse is broken, we're free." And with that, Emma disappeared, along with the last of the whispered ones. Sophia sank into her chair, exhausted but relieved. The silence in the room was profound, no longer haunted, but filled with a sense of peace. She had done what Emma couldn't. She had freed the lost souls of Willowbrook. As dawn broke over the misty hills, Sophia knew that Willowbrook would never feel the same. The spirits were finally at rest, and the whispers at midnight had been silenced forever. Chapter 5. A Town Restored. The morning after her midnight confrontation, Sophia felt an unexplainable calm in Willowbrook. Gone was the ever-present chill and the dense fog that had always seemed to linger around the town. The air felt lighter, and even the townspeople looked different. As she walked through the streets, she noticed something remarkable. The residents of Willowbrook, who had always been reserved and cautious, appeared more at ease. Some even nodded and smiled as she passed, as if a veil had lifted from their spirits. Word of her actions had spread quickly. Though no one spoke directly about the curse, it was clear that they understood something had changed. Sophia was surprised to find Tom waiting on her cottage porch later that day, his usual solemn expression replaced by a small, grateful smile. "You've done something that none of us had the courage to do," he said softly, his voice filled with gratitude. "You've given Willowbrook its freedom back." Sophia, though still processing everything she had experienced, managed a small smile in return. "I only finished what Emma started," she replied. "The spirits weren't trying to harm us. They were just trapped, waiting for someone to set them free." Tom nodded knowingly. "They waited a long time," he murmured. "For nearly a century, this town lived in the shadow of that tragedy. I was just a boy when the whispers began, but I remember how it changed everyone. Fear became our way of life. But maybe now, that fear can finally be left behind." The days that followed were a whirlwind for Sophia. The townspeople began opening up to her, sharing stories of loved ones they had lost to the curse, stories that had been buried for decades. The community came together in a way she hadn't seen before. It was as though the shared burden of their town's haunted past had lifted, and with it, a new sense of unity emerged. Sophia spent time writing down her experiences, carefully recording Emma's story and her own journey into the town's mystery. She felt a strong need to preserve the tale, not only as a memory of the spirits but as a tribute to Emma, whose bravery had paved the way for peace in Willowbrook. As she worked, she realized that her arrival in Willowbrook, her discovery of Emma's journal, and the events that had unfolded were more than mere coincidence. She had been drawn here for a reason, to finish what Emma had started. One evening, as Sophia was packing away the last of her research, she felt a sudden urge to visit the lake, the place where the town's tragedy had first begun. She walked through the quiet streets and down to the water's edge. The lake, once shrouded in a sinister mist, was calm, reflecting the twilight sky like a mirror. She stood there in silence, feeling a profound sense of closure. Just as she was about to turn back, a soft breeze brushed her cheek, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she heard Emma's voice, a gentle whisper, full of gratitude and peace. It was as if Emma were saying goodbye, a final farewell to the world that had bound her. Sophia smiled, her heart full of warmth. She knew that Emma, along with the other spirits, had finally found their way home. The chapter of the Whispered Ones had come to an end, and in its place, Willowbrook had been given a new beginning. When she returned to her cottage, she felt lighter, as if she, too, had let go of something she hadn't known she was carrying. For the first time in months, she felt genuinely at peace. Willowbrook was no longer just a town, it was a place of healing, not only for her but for everyone who had been touched by its mysterious past. As the days turned to weeks, Sophia prepared to move on, knowing that her purpose here had been fulfilled. But Willowbrook, with its newfound light and warmth, would always be a part of her. She left behind a copy of Emma's journal in the town library, hoping it would remind others of the courage it took to face the unknown and the healing power of compassion. With a final glance at the town she had come to love, Sophia left Willowbrook, her heart full of gratitude for the journey she had undertaken. The town, once haunted by whispers, now resonated with the quiet harmony of peace, and she knew that, in some way, it would continue to watch over her, just as she had watched over it.